So imagine standing by a shallow pond, right? You're just watching a man drown.
Yeah, it's a terrifying scenario to even picture.
It really is. And, you are perfectly safe on the bank. You could literally reach down, extend a branch, and pull him out without even getting your shoes wet.
Right. Completely zero risk to yourself.
Exactly. But for whatever reason, you just choose to do absolutely nothing. You watch him slip under the surface, and he dies. Now, morally, society would consider you a monster.
Oh, absolutely.
But legally, under the strict mechanics of the law, you actually haven't committed a crime at all.
I mean, it creates this massive paradox, right, between our ethical expectations as human beings and our actual legal realities.
Yeah.
I think it's a perfect entry point into what we are examining today in this deep dive.
Yeah, the invisible, almost counterintuitive anatomy of criminal law. Because, for you listening, we tend to view crime purely as like a cinematic event.
Oh, for sure. The shattered glass, the smoking gun, the yellow police tape.
Right. But when you step into the actual machinery of the justice system, you realize that an event is not a crime until it satisfies a very rigid, highly abstract set of conditions.
Exactly.
And that structural reality is our focus today. We're taking a comprehensive set of legal notes and exam guides to just completely dissect the basic building blocks of a crime.
It's a great mission.
And our goal today, the explicit mission for this deep dive, is to explain these rules using only simple English. We are avoiding heavy legal jargon wherever possible.
Which is tough with the law, but we'll do it.
Right. We'll explain the Latin terms, but we'll stick to plain language, and we're going to recap often so you never feel lost. Because, honestly, if you don't understand the underlying logic, the law just looks like a series of arbitrary punishments.
It really does. And, the underlying logic is basically built on a tripartite formula. I mean, almost every crime requires three distinct parts to intersect.
Okay, lay them out for us.
First, you have what lawyers call the mens rea, or it's the guilty mind, the mental state. Second is the actus reus, which is the guilty act, the physical part.
Right, mind and body.
Exactly. And third, there is causation. The guilty act must actually be the thing that causes the final result. So you need the mind, the act, and that causal link.
And hovering over all three of those pieces is the golden rule, right? The ultimate burden of proof.
Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right. If the prosecution can prove the act and the causation, but the evidence of what you were thinking leaves room for reasonable doubt, then the whole thing collapses. You walk free.
It's designed to be precarious. The system is built to make it extremely difficult for the state to lock someone up.
Okay, so what does this all mean? Let's break down the first piece of the puzzle, the physical act. Intuitively, this seems super easy. A crime requires an action.
Right, but the legal definition of an act kind of expands and contracts in some really fascinating ways.
Okay, well, let's start with the baseline rule.
The absolute baseline is that you cannot be punished merely for your thoughts. There's no such thing as a thought crime.
So just having bad thoughts in your head is never enough?
Never. You could sit in your living room and harbor the most vivid, detailed plans to hurt someone. But until those thoughts translate into a physical action in the real world, the state cannot touch you.
But wait. What if I don't use my hands? Like, what if I just talk, or what if I just have something in my pocket? Does that count as a physical act?
It does. I mean, speech is a great example. Words definitely count as an act.
Wait, really? Just talking?
Yeah. Think about extortion. Making threats to get money. The criminal act there isn't physically reaching into someone's pocket. The act is the threat itself, the words you spoke.
Oh, right. Or like encouraging someone else to commit a crime.
Exactly. Conspiracy or solicitation. You didn't touch anything, but your speech altered the world.
Okay, so talking counts. What about my other example? Just having something. Because possession is like the most passive thing ever.
Yeah, possession is tricky. Having an illegal item does count as an act, but with a big catch. You must actually know you have it.
So if I borrow a jacket and there's stolen diamonds sewn into the lining, and I have zero clue they were there.
You are not guilty of possession you didn't know.
But what if I reach into the pocket, pull them out, and go, oh, wow, stolen diamonds? Am I instantly guilty that very second?
Well, under certain rules, like the Model Penal Code, no. The law says you must have had enough time to get rid of the item once you realize what it is.
Okay, so I need a minute to toss them in the trash or hand them to a cop.
Right, because the act has to be a choice. And that brings us to the biggest requirement: the act must be voluntary.
Okay, let's unpack this. Voluntary. If someone comes up behind me and shoves me into another person, and that person falls, I didn't make a choice. I was pushed, so I'm not guilty of hitting them. Right.
Correct. You were essentially a human bowling ball. You didn't choose to move your muscles.
What about stuff going on inside my own body, like sleepwalking?
Sleepwalking is a classic example of a non-voluntary act. If you genuinely sleepwalk and hit someone, your conscious mind was turned off. Same thing if you are unconscious or having a reflex action.
Wow, so I'm off the hook.
Usually. But what's fascinating here is there's a huge exception. Let's say you have a known health risk, like a history of severe seizures.
Okay.
And you know this, but you choose to get behind the wheel of a car anyway.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. If you have a seizure while driving and crash into someone, you are convulsing at the moment of the crash. That's involuntary. But the law looks backward.
To the moment I picked up the keys.
Exactly. Your prior choice to drive, knowing the risk, that was the voluntary act. You can absolutely be held responsible for that.
Okay, let me just do a quick mini recap here in simple English to make sure we're tracking.
Yeah.
So thoughts are not crimes. Acts have to be physical and voluntary. But talking counts and holding items counts as long as you know you have them and had time to ditch them.
Perfect.
Awesome. So we just talked about doing things, but what if you do nothing? What if doing nothing is the crime?
Criminal omissions. This is a highly debated area because normally doing nothing is perfectly fine.
Right, this is the bystander rule, like my pond example from the intro.
Yes, a regular bystander has absolutely no legal duty to help someone in danger. You can just stand there.
But there are exceptions, right? The notes say there are exactly 5 situations where you have a legal duty to act.
That's right. You are only guilty for failing to act if you fall into one of these 5 specific buckets.
Okay, let's hit them. What's number 1?
Number 1 is statute. A written law explicitly says you must act.
Like filing your taxes.
Exactly. If you sit on your couch on tax day and do nothing, that omission is a crime. Number 2 is contract.
So I agreed to act for a job, like a hired lifeguard.
Right. You took the money, you put on the uniform. You can't just watch someone drown now.
Makes sense. What's the third?
Special relationship. The law says you are inherently responsible for someone else.
Like a parent protecting a child.
Or spouses protecting each other. You can't just ignore your toddler walking into traffic. Number 4 is a bit of a trap. It's voluntary help.
Wait, how is helping a trap?
Let's say you try to help the drowning man. You wade into the water, you grab him link,
Okay.
but then you realize the water's freezing and you want to go home. So you drop him and leave. If your attempt to help actually made his situation worse or stopped someone else from helping, you are now legally on the hook.
Wow, so I basically anchored myself to the situation by interfering.
Precisely. Either stay out of it or see it through reasonably. And the 5th and final exception is causing danger.
So I created the dangerous situation in the first place.
Yeah. You accidentally start a fire in the woods. You can't just walk away and not call the fire department. You created the peril, so you have a duty to mitigate it.
Okay, but even if I am a parent or a lifeguard or I started the fire, are there limits to this duty?
Yes. Even if you fall into those 5 groups, there are 2 strict requirements before you get in trouble. First, you actually had to know about the bad situation.
So if my kid sneaks out of the house at midnight and gets stuck in a tree and I'm fast asleep, I can't be charged for not helping them. I didn't know.
Right. And second, you must be physically able to help. The law doesn't demand you jump into a hurricane to save someone if it's going to kill you instantly.
Okay, time for another mini recap. Simply put, for you listening, if you have no duty, you have no liability. You can be a terrible bystander. But if you are a parent, a lifeguard, or you started the fire, you must try to help if you physically can and if you know about it.
Spot on.
All right, so we know what an act is and what an omission is. Now we have to look inside the brain, the guilty mind. And a crime usually needs the guilty mind and the guilty act to happen at the exact same time, right?
Yes, they have to concur. And historically, the law broke the guilty mind into 3 broad categories: specific intent, malice, and general intent.
Okay, let's start at the top. Specific intent crimes. What does that actually mean?
It means having a very special, forward-looking goal in mind when you do the act.
Yeah.
You aren't just moving your body, you want a specific result.
Give me an example.
First-degree murder is one. Or theft crimes, like robbery or burglary.
Because I'm breaking in with the specific goal of stealing, not just to get out of the cold.
Exactly. And the notes give us a great memory trick for these specific intent crimes. The mnemonic is F-I-A. F-I-A-T.
F-I-A-T. Okay, break that down.
F is for first-degree murder. I is for inchoate crimes, which is just a fancy word for planning crimes like attempt or conspiracy.
Right.
A is for assault. And T is for theft crimes.
That's super helpful, FIAT. And, because this requires such a super specific goal in your brain, there are special defenses here, right?
There are.
Like if I was voluntarily drunk, blotto, or if I made a really silly, totally unreasonable mistake of fact, I might actually not be guilty of a specific intent crime because my brain literally couldn't form that complicated goal.
That's entirely correct. It sounds crazy to the general public, but being blackout drunk can save you from a specific intent charge because you couldn't form the intent to permanently deprive someone of property.
Wow. Okay, so that's specific intent. What about the next one down? Malice crimes. That sounds like you're just angry.
It does, but legally it's not a specific goal or anger. Malice just means a reckless disregard of a high risk. You just didn't care that someone might get hurt.
Give me an example of that.
Arson, burning things. If you light a bonfire in your yard during a massive windstorm
Yeah.
and your neighbor's house burns down, you didn't have the specific intent to burn their house wrong.
But I ignored a huge risk.
Exactly. That's malice. Some types of murder fall under this too.
Okay, and what's the third bucket? General intent crimes.
This one is much simpler. You only needed the intent to do the physical act itself. You didn't need a specific goal afterward.
So like battery, hitting someone.
Right. Or rape or kidnapping. The prosecution just has to prove you intended to move your muscles to do the prohibited act.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting for me. What if my intent accidentally hits the wrong target?
Transferred intent.
Yeah, like what if I pick up a heavy rock and I throw it at you, but you duck? And the rock hits an innocent bystander walking behind you. I didn't even know they were there.
The law handles this beautifully. Your intent transfers. You aimed at person A, but you hit person B. You are fully guilty of hitting person B.
Even though I didn't mean to hit them.
Yes. The intent travels with the rock. It applies to murder, battery, arson.
But there is a limit to this, right?
And there's a very strict limit. It does not apply to attempted crimes.
So if I throw the rock at you, you duck, and the rock hits absolutely nobody. It just lands in the grass.
Then you are guilty of attempted battery against your original target. But you are not guilty of attempting to hit the bystander. Because the rock didn't hit them, your intent doesn't transfer.
Got it. Okay, mini recap on the mind. Specific intent means having a clear, forward-looking goal, like theft. Malice means not caring about a huge risk, like arson. General intent means just wanting to do the physical action, like hitting. And bad intent can transfer from one victim to another as long as it's not just an attempt.
You're nailing these recaps.
I'm trying. Okay, so we have these three old categories. But the law came up with an even simpler way to rank how guilty a mind is, right?
Yes. Legal scholars realized the old buckets were kind of messy. So they created the Model Penal Code, or the MPC.
And this gives us 4 easy steps to rank mental states from highest to lowest. Let's walk down those steps in simple English. Step 1.
Step 1 is purposely. You absolutely wanted the result to happen. It was your conscious object.
Like an assassin pulling a trigger.
Exactly. Step 2 is knowingly. You knew the result was almost certain to happen, even if it wasn't your main goal.
Wait, how is that different from purposely?
Well, say you blow up a server room to destroy computers, but you know a security guard is sitting right there. Your goal isn't to kill the guard.
I don't care about the guard either way.
Right. But you are absolutely certain he will die when you blow up the room. So you killed him knowingly, not purposely.
Okay, that makes sense. Step 3.
Recklessly. You knew there was a big risk, but you ignored it. You weren't certain it would happen, but you took a wild chance.
Like driving 100 miles an hour through a neighborhood.
Yes. And a crucial note here. Recklessly is the default rule. If a law is written and doesn't state a mental level, courts just assume it requires recklessness.
Good to know. And the final step, step 4.
Negligently. This means you did not know the risk at all. Your mind was blank.
How can a blank mind be guilty?
Because any normal, reasonable person should have known the risk. Like using a rotting rope to hoist a piano over a sidewalk. You might genuinely think the rope is fine, but you're being an idiot.
Oh, so your ignorance is your guilt.
Exactly. And the neat rule for these 4 MPC steps is that if you prove a higher mental state, it automatically counts for the lower ones. If you prove someone acted purposely, you've already proven they acted knowingly, recklessly, and negligently.
It trickles down. Okay, but let me ask you this. Are there times when the brain doesn't matter at all? Where just doing the act is enough to send you to jail?
Yes, and it's a terrifying concept called strict liability.
So no mind required.
0. No mental state is required. If you did the act, you were guilty. Period.
What kinds of crimes fall under this?
They're usually public welfare offenses. things designed to protect public safety. Selling alcohol to minors is the classic example.
So if I'm a bartender and a kid hands me a flawless, incredibly realistic fake ID, I look at it, I genuinely believe they are 25, I serve them a beer.
It's a sting operation. They are 19. You are guilty.
I tried my best.
It doesn't matter. The law wants bartenders to be absolutely terrified of making mistakes, so they put the burden entirely on you. Other examples are food and drug safety rules and statutory rape.
And usually these have minor penalties, except for statutory rape, which has huge prison time.
Correct.
And there's another weird liability rule here too, right? Vicarious liability. Taking the blame for others.
Yeah. This is when you are punished for an act someone else did.
Wait, how is that fair?
It's mostly used in business. Employers taking the blame for employees or corporations taking the blame for workers.
So back to the bartender. If I'm the owner of the bar and I'm asleep at home and my bartender serves the minor.
You, the sleeping owner, can be charged under vicarious liability. As long as the worker was doing their job at the time, the business takes the hit.
Okay, mini recap time. The 4 MPC levels are purpose, knowledge, reckless, and negligent. Strict liability means the mind doesn't matter at all act, and you're guilty. And vicarious liability means you pay for someone else's mistake at work.
Perfect.
All right, so we have the mind and we have the act. You briefly mentioned causation earlier. The act must actually be the thing that causes the final result. But what if the cause was just a simple mistake on my part? Let's talk about defenses.
Okay, mistakes are split into 2 categories, mistake of fact and mistake of law.
Let's do mistake of fact first, messing up the details of the real world. Like, what if I take someone's jacket from a coat room because I truly genuinely thought it was mine?
This is where those intent buckets come back into play. The type of crime determines if your mistake saves you.
Okay, what if I'm charged with a specific intent crime, like theft?
For a specific intent crime, any mistake works as a defense, even if it was a totally silly, unreasonable mistake.
Wait, so if my jacket is blue and the one I took is red and 3 sizes too big and I still thought it was mine, I'm safe?
Yes, because theft requires the specific goal to steal someone else's property. If you truly believed it was yours, even if you are an idiot for thinking that, you simply did not have the specific intent to steal.
Wow. Okay, what if it's a general intent crime?
Then the rules get tougher. For general intent, the mistake must be reasonable. If any normal person would make that mistake, you are safe. If it's a silly mistake, you go to jail.
And for strict liability?
A mistake is never a defense. Ever. It does not matter what you thought.
Harsh. Okay, that's mistake of fact. What about mistake of law? Not knowing the rules. What if I just had no idea the thing I was doing was illegal?
I hate to break it to you, but the rule here is brutal. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse.
But there are tens of thousands of laws.
Doesn't matter. You're expected to know them.
What if I hire a fancy lawyer and they tell me my business plan is 100% legal and I follow their advice, but they were wrong?
You still go to jail. Getting bad advice from a private lawyer does not save you.
That is insane to me. Are there any exceptions to this?
Very few. You're only safe in 3 narrow situations. First, if you relied on an official court order or an official government statement. Not a private lawyer, but the government itself.
Okay, that seems fair. They can't trick you.
Second, if the law was totally hidden and not published or available to read.
Sure.
And third, if not knowing the law somehow proves you didn't have the required specific intent for a very complicated crime, like tax evasion. Sometimes the tax code requires you to intentionally break a known rule.
Okay, let me review that quickly. A mistake about facts can save you, depending on the crime. Specific intent protects silly mistakes. General intent only protects reasonable ones. But a mistake about the law almost never saves you unless the government itself messed up or hid the law.
You've got it.
Awesome. So we now know what makes a crime. The final step today is figuring out which court actually has the power to punish you. Jurisdiction. Who makes the rules?
Well, we have 2 main rule makers in the U.S., the states and the federal government.
Let's start with the states.
The states have very broad power to make crimes. It's called police power. Basically, they can criminalize almost anything they think hurts public safety or welfare.
What about the federal government?
They are the opposite. They have very limited power. They can only make laws based on specific powers listed in the Constitution, like regulating interstate commerce.
And the notes point out a really big rule for federal crimes. There are no common law federal crimes. What does that mean?
It means unwritten crimes. In state courts, historically, a judge could look at something awful and just declare it a crime based on tradition.
Federal judges can't do that.
No. Every single federal crime must be written down in a specific statute passed by Congress. If it's not written down, it's not a federal crime.
But both the states and the feds have some strict constitutional limits, right? Things they absolutely cannot do.
Yes, neither one can pass ex post facto laws.
Meaning after the fact.
Exactly. They can't make something a crime today and then arrest you for doing it yesterday when it was still legal.
Makes total sense. What's the other limit?
Vague laws. A law can't be so confusing or badly written that nobody understands what's actually illegal. It has to be clear.
Okay, so that's who makes the laws. But where do they apply? Territorial power. Where does the crime have to happen?
Well, federal power applies to federal land, like national parks or military bases. It also covers U.S. citizens traveling abroad and ships or airplanes.
And state power.
State power applies if even a tiny part of the crime happens in that state.
Wait, let me push back on that. What if I stand in state A, let's say Nevada, and I shoot a gun across the border into state B, California? The bullet hits someone in California. Which state gets to prosecute me?
Both of them.
Both.
Yes. Because part of the crime happened in both states. You pulled the trigger in Nevada, so they have power. The harm happened in California, so they have power too.
But doesn't that violate double jeopardy, being tried twice for the same crime?
No, because they're separate sovereigns. You broke Nevada's law and California's law at the same time.
That is wild.
State power also covers attempts outside the state to do a crime inside, or conspiracies that affect the state, or failing to do a legal duty required by that state, even if you moved away.
Okay, final mini recap. States have broad power to make laws. Feds are super limited and must write them down. You can't be punished for a law made yesterday. And if any single piece of your crime touches a state, they own the case, even if another state does too.
A perfect summary of jurisdiction.
We did it. So let's run through the ultimate checklist one last time for you listening. Was there a voluntary act or a duty to act? What was the mental state? Was it purposely, knowingly, recklessly, negligently, or strict liability? Did the act actually cause the result? Are there any mistake defenses that work? And finally, does the court actually have jurisdiction to try you?
That is the complete anatomy of a crime.
It really is. But before we sign off, you said you had a final thought to mull over. Something provocative.
I do. Think back to our discussion on strict liability. We learned that under strict liability, your intent doesn't matter at all. Even if you tried your absolute hardest to follow the rules, if the act happens, you are guilty.
Right, it's totally focused on the outcome.
Now think about how society is changing. As society gets more complicated with more technology, more AI, more autonomous vehicles, and more complex safety regulations, will we see the guilty mind slowly disappear from the law completely?
Oh, wow.
Right. Will a future system care only about what you did or what your machine did rather than what you thought? Will the mens rea just evaporate?
That is a fascinating and kind of terrifying thing to think about. Just totally erasing the human element of intent. It's definitely something for all of you listening to explore on your own as you watch the news and see how these laws evolve. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. Hopefully you can look at the world of rules around you with fresh eyes. We'll see you next time.